welcome to Inside this week opening edition of Big Ten Today. I'm your host, Rick Pizzo. And we begin today with an inside look at the team picked by many to win the Big Ten and potentially deliver a third straight national title to the conference. Penn State is coming off the winningest season in program history, a year that included a trip to the Big Ten title game and 2 wins in the college football playoff. Best of all, a large core of that team returns in 2025 for James Franklin and a staff well aware of, yet completely unfazed by all the expectations.
No one cares about preseason rankings. Like, I'm not going to frame the preseason rankings and put it in my basement in a man cave. Like, no one cares. No one cares. So all that's wonderful. We want to spend our time working on the things that are going to allow us to do the things that we want to do this year, starting with Nevada and creating the habits and behaviors that will get us there, not talking about, not spending a ton of time talking about, goals and those types of things. There's a place for it, but we're focused on what we have to do to have the type of season that we want to have.
But the key point you made is in the teaching and installing, of it. And I've gotten better at that. And I have to, particularly coming into a situation like this. Our charge is to be great now. So if it's too complicated or I can't get it installed in a way that the players pick it up quickly, then that's my fault. So I think I've developed a process that helps move it along at a more rapid pace.
As a coach and a teacher, one of the easy things to do is want to always coach your young guys first, because typically that's kind of the low-hanging fruit, because the things that you teach them are so superficial. But to coach a guy like Drew Aller and Nick Dawkins and the receivers that are seniors and Dink, who was brought up earlier, like those guys have played a lot of football. Like, for us as coaches and teachers to develop them, we got to find other ways to challenge them and grow. And it's actually been really fun and rewarding as coaches to be able to do that, the things that we can do with them.
Time now for today's big interview. Rick Pizzo, thrilled to be joined by a man whose name is synonymous with college football previews. He's done it for a long time, and for many of us, a Bible as we get ready for the college football season. Phil Steele. Phil, I know it is a crazy busy time of the year for you. Thanks so much for taking the time, and welcome to the show.
Yeah, appreciate that, Rick. Actually, this is my casual time of the year. I may be working 60 hours a week just doing a bunch of radio, TV shows, so it's sort of my kickback time.
Phil, we just heard from James Franklin and some of the Penn State coordinators as they head into a year where many believe that Penn State, not Ohio State, the defending national champs, not Oregon, the defending Big Ten champs, but the Nittany Lions are the favorites to win the Big Ten. Why do so many people believe that's the case, and do you also believe that's the case?
Yeah, I tell you what, for the first time in the 31 years of the magazine, I've picked Penn State to win it all this year. And, I think they have the same things going for them that Michigan and Ohio State had the last 2 years. And that is a lot of players turned down the NFL, opted to return for the senior season. Now, if you look at all the top contenders, very few returned their starting quarterback. Drew Aller is back for Penn State. It's his 3rd year as a starter. We saw improvement last year. Then you look at the running back core. I rated him #1 in the country. Offensive line, how about #1 in the country? You look at the receivers. Last year is sort of a weakness, but this year they've added in 3 big-time transfers. I think that's going to aid that. Defensively, they're loaded with Danny Dennis-Sutton, Zane Durant up front. Every unit on the defense is solid, and they're even one of the top special teams. They've been very close to Ohio State the last couple of years, but I think this much more veteran Penn State team, which gained playoff experience last year, is ready for that breakthrough year. And that's why first time in the 31 years of the magazine, I picked them not only #1 in the Big Ten, but #1 overall in the country.
Well, you brought up quarterback Drew Aller, a guy who has been remarkably productive. He's won a ton of games. Yet, Phil, for those of us who cover Penn State and follow this program, we know, and I know it goes along with being a quarterback, he takes a lot of criticism. What's your overall assessment of Aller throughout his career and what you expect from him this year?
I think year one, we saw him struggle in the big games. And even last year, Ohio State, Notre Dame, a couple of games where he had 0 touchdown passes, a combined 2 interceptions. But what we did see was improvement from 59% to 65%. And now with all this experience under his belt and having played in the playoffs like he did last year, and let's face it, Ohio State and Notre Dame had two of the best defenses in the entire country, I think we're going to see a veteran quarterback that has his best year by far and one of the top quarterbacks in the country. I think it'd be a Heisman contender at the end of the season.
So Phil has Penn State to win it all. But, Phil, as you know, to be the king, you have to beat the king. And right now, the king is Ohio State, coming off the national championship of a year ago. How do you compare this version of Ohio State to the team that we saw a year ago?
Well, talent-wise, they're probably pretty close. But experience-wise, they're a lot less experienced because last year, as mentioned, Ohio State had a lot of players turn down the NFL, opted to return. That was a veteran unit. They just lost 14 players to the NFL draft, something they didn't do last year. But talent-wise, they're a complete team across the board. All of their units rank in my top units in the front of the magazine. And when you look at their schedule this year for Ohio State, I mean, their two toughest opponents are Texas and Penn State, and they get them both at home. Ohio State will likely be favored in all 12 games. But let's keep in mind, last year, even that uber-talented Ohio State team lost 2 games during the regular season. They weren't even the Big Ten champs. They were the national champs. So I think it's going to be tough for them to repeat as national champs, as they are a lot less experienced this year.
No one is more talented on the Ohio State team. There may be no more talented player in the country than Buckeye wide receiver Jeremiah Smith. Just how special is he, and how much of a factor do you think he will be in the Heisman Trophy race at the end of the year?
I think he's already mentioned as one of the favorites for the Heisman Trophy, and that's good. You get a start like that, everybody's talking about you. Clearly, he looks like the best receiver in the country, and he's the reason that I've got Ohio State, as usual, the #1 receiving core in the country. I think he's going to help out a young quarterback and be one of the top stars. To win the Heisman, he's probably going to have to do something other than just be a receiver. I think most receivers that win the Heisman have to do the return game or play a little defense, but I think he is a legitimate Heisman Trophy and the best wide receiver in the country.
Oregon has a lot to replace in 2025, starting with quarterback Dylan Gabriel. Also took a huge blow when Evan Stewart got hurt at the wide receiver position. Where do the defending Big Ten champion Ducks fit in the 2025 picture?
You know, I thought they lost a lot, but going over the team with Coach Lanning, I feel that they've replaced the talent. In fact, all their units rank in my top 20 units in the front of the magazine, with the exception of quarterback. Now, Dante Moore, if you watch him 2 years ago at UCLA, didn't impress me that much, but he was a freshman, and he didn't have the surrounding talent that he has here. I love the additions that Lanning brought in on the offensive line. He brought in 4 studs on the O-line. I think that unit is solved. Stewart coming back a receiver is huge. The defense is loaded. The only game I have Oregon an underdog in all year is when they travel to face Penn State on the road. So I think Oregon is a legitimate chance of defending its Big Ten title this year.
Phil, one of the best stories in all of college football last year, maybe in the history of college football, was what Curt Cignetti did at Indiana, because no one outside of Coach Sig expected it. How likely is it that Indiana can back up one historic season with another?
You know, I thought they lost a lot. And then going over the squad with Coach Cignetti, I like the replacements that they have. In fact, they may have more talent on this year's Indiana team than they had last year. Now, the schedule is more difficult. They have to play Illinois at home, which I think is a playoff elimination game. They have to play Iowa, Oregon, and Penn State all on the road. So it's a more difficult schedule this year. But Fernando Mendoza steps in at quarterback. I like what I saw to him at Cal. Defensively, they've got Kamara and Fisher back. Talent-wise, they're probably a little more talented than last year. They're just playing a tougher schedule, and they're not going to sneak up on anybody. I'm really anxious to watch that Illinois-Indiana game. I think that's a playoff elimination game early in the year.
Well, Phil, speaking of playoffs, we just touched on the 4 teams from the Big Ten that made the college football playoff a year ago. Outside of that group, which team in the Big Ten do you think may be poised to either make a title run or at least make a big step forward in 2025?
Yeah, I think you have to look at the Nebraska Cornhuskers, and it's year 3 for Matt Rule. Year 3, of course, at Temple and Baylor. He had double-digit win seasons. I like the fact that Raiola is back at quarterback. And, you know, Raiola had his freshman ups and downs last year, which is going to happen with the first-year starter that's a true freshman. But now they've got an experienced offensive line, I think an upgraded receiving core, and Johnson really emerged. Once Dana Holgerson started calling the shots down the stretch, he averaged over 100 yards per game. Defensive front 7, they lose some talent, but I think they'll be able to replace it. They've had a top 25 defense the last 2 years. And then when you look at the schedule this year, There's only one game I've got them a true underdog, at Penn State. There are some toss-up games on the schedule, like when they host Michigan and they have to travel to Minnesota. But I think if you're looking for a team that really no one's talking about to make the playoff this year, I give Nebraska a really good shot.
I'm glad you brought up that schedule. It is a year in which they play 5 Big Ten games in Lincoln, and some of those road games very manageable, like road games against Maryland and UCLA. Have to have that schedule on your side as well to be able to make a run. Speaking of runs, Illinois made a huge run last year, but they weren't the first team out of your mouth when I asked about a team that maybe some don't expect to make a run at the title in 2025. What do you think of Illinois?
You know, and the reason that I didn't bring them up, Rick, is that they had won 10 games last year. Let's face it, Indiana won 3 the previous year, so they're not really an Indiana team, but they are a legitimate playoff contender. And Coach Bielema, look at the offensive line he's built this year. They've got a veteran quarterback coming back. The defense is just loaded. This is, of all the top 15 teams from last year, this is the most experienced unit coming back. Now, I wasn't blown away with Illinois last year. I thought their best game probably came, the 2 games were home against Michigan and then South Carolina in the bowl game. But this year's squad, I think, is much better than last year's squad, and they were a ready contender last year. So I think Illinois has to be counted. That Illinois-Indiana matchup early on is going to be a huge game as far as a playoff elimination game. I think the Big Ten's got a great shot to get 4 teams into the playoff this year, and you have to count Illinois as a prime contender.
Phil, let's finish here. I'm so curious. You do all this work, you and your staff, to put this magazine out. Are you week by week checking out every game and as many conferences as you can to see how reality lines up with what you guys expected to happen in the 2025 season?
Yeah, on Saturday, Rick, I've got 12 TVs in front of me, so I'm watching 12 games at the same time all day long on Saturday, all the way till that Hawaii game finishes at 3 o'clock in the morning. And then I do not watch the NFL. I do not watch any other sport. On Sundays, I'm watching replays of the game, so I go play-by-play of the game as opposed to trying to watch all 12. I'm working about 100-plus hours a week during the season trying to keep track with each and every one of the 136 teams.
See, and I thought you were going to tell me Sunday was actually a day of rest. Even he gets a day of rest on Sunday, but Phil Steele does not. Phil, as always, we appreciate you dropping some terrific knowledge on the Big Ten and college football as a whole. Enjoy the season.
Yeah, appreciate you having me on, Rick. I think you guys on the Big Ten Network do a great job. I am a constant viewer of your station.
We have 74 guys that we can travel. But for the coaches, I want the coaches developing every single guy because, you know, I actually had this conversation today, Mitch. I told them, like, you know, you're in the NFL and it's week, 15 and the guy gets hurt. You bring in guys off the street and you work them out. Well, those guys, for us, they're going to step up in week 11, 10, 12. We plan on playing a lot of games, right? So they're on our roster. They might be right now, they might be running with the 3s or the 4s tonight, but there's going to be a time where, kind of like Gunnar did last year. He went from 3rd to 1, kind of overnight. And so we have to develop all of those guys. So I don't talk to the coaches about that. I think the players kind of have a good feel, but I tell the guys in the first week, don't spend a lot of time worrying about where you are. And really, and it's kind of like a stoic thing, and not everyone, not everyone's really, sees it this way. But I want them to be resilient enough where they're not even paying attention to where they are. They're saying to themselves, am I becoming a great player? We're smart enough as coaches to find a way to get great players on the field. So don't worry about, am I better than this guy? Worry about, am I a great player? If I'm a great player, we'll get both you guys on the field. I don't want to bring anyone in here who complains about having to eat in the training table. I didn't want to bring anyone in here. I already fixed that problem. I don't want to bring anybody who complains about practice. Now it's the other way. I end practice on Thursday was a shorter practice, I think. Thursday, and Dylan's yelling at me get another rack. I'm like, first of all, he's a quarterback. You're not hitting anybody, but they're all let's get another rack. And Dylan's walked off. He goes, he always makes fun of me. He's like, yeah, we like practice. So I want guys who like practice. So they've brought that. The Suns brought that, right? Not that they brought it to a team that didn't have it. They've just assimilated into a bunch of guys who love practice. And so, there's not a deal where you're well, that guy's a transfer. That guy's been one of us for a long time. It's very much we're kind of all in it together. So it's a really healthy thing.
Nebraska enters year 3 under Matt Rule, coming off its first postseason appearance in nearly a decade. Expectations now well beyond just a bowl game in 2025. And Rule's track record at previous stops, specifically the jump his team's made in season 3, is a huge reason why. Temple and Baylor improving by a combined 18 wins in that span with Rule at the helm. Dave Revson and our training camp crew were in Lincoln over the weekend to see the Huskers firsthand.
Rick, thanks so much. The football tour underway as we get ready for year 19 of Big Ten football coverage here on the network. Got a chance to see the Huskers, Dave Revson, Howard Griffith, and Jake Butt. There's a lot of excitement around this Nebraska team. They ended the bowl drought a season ago. Amazingly, they had the longest bowl drought in Power Conference football, which is hard to believe given the history of this program. They capped it off by winning a bowl game, and now the question is, can you take the next step? And I think a lot of the questions are around this offense. The offense wasn't good enough last year to be an elite team. Bring in Dana Holgorsen as offensive coordinator. Dylan Raiola in year 2. What did you think?
Well, I think it starts with Dylan, right? To be able to go out and make the plays that he has to show the confidence that he has, not only in his own skills, but the skilled players around him. I think that's a big part of it. And you mentioned Coach Holgorsen. That was a big shift for them to come in and bring him in and kind of simplify the offense, pare it down a little bit. And I think that this is a team that's going to have a chance to make a lot of noise.
Yeah, I mean, look, speculation, potential, it doesn't mean anything to the staff, to the players, to the fan base. But I'll just tell you what I know just looking at practice today. This offense has an identity. They found something, and the players back their offensive coordinator, Dana Holgorsen. Dylan Raiola, there was a ton of excitement last year. Imagine what he can be in year 2 with an upgrade at play caller. The wide receivers, this is one of the more underrated wide receiver groups in the conference, and they were without one of their starters, Dane Key. Offensive line completely transformed their body. This offense, I would be shocked if they didn't take a step. The question is how big that step will be.
Well, one of the big things they have to do is stop turning the ball over. They made some progress this past year, actually significant progress from where they were 2 years ago, but still they haven't had a positive turnover margin since 2016. And talking to Matt Rule, it's all of those little things that add up. But to your point, Jake, I mean, obviously both you guys really impressed with the quarterback. Ball didn't hit the ground a whole lot with Dylan Raiola. He's on time, he's on target, got a really good running back in Emmett Johnson. They've upgraded at wide receiver. You feel good about the line. I mean, there's no reason to think that this can't be a much better offense than it was a year ago. And so then the question becomes, Jake, can you be as good as you've been on defense here for the first 2 years? Because under Matt Rule, this has been a defense. I mean, giving up fewer than 20 points per game each of the last 2 years, that is good enough to win anywhere in college football. Those are the 2 best scoring defenses that they've had in their time in the Big Ten. Now you've got a new DC in John Butler. Can you continue that trend?
Yeah, it's going to look different, but the standard remains the same. And that's talking to Coach Butler. That's talking to the players. The standard remains the exact same. It's going to look different, though. I think that the veteran back end of this secondary bodes well for an aggressive defense. They're going to want to send pressure. Well, they can trust those guys in the back end to do their job and adjust if they leave them on islands. It's apparent it's going to look different, particularly up front. I mean, missing Nash and Ty, those are 2 big bodies. I saw smaller bodies, but more mobile bodies. That could bode well in some of their pressure looks. So it will look different, but once again, I'm excited to see this because just following practice, the standard is still there.
Yeah, I think when you start to look at just where that pressure might come from, they have the people that can get it done. There's no question about that. It's just how quickly they're going to be able to develop, and how quickly they develop also determines just how many packages you can start to put in. But I think it still is going to start up front, knowing that you have the veterans on the back end that can mix some things up. But if they are getting pressure on the quarterback consistently, that equates to turnovers, and that means the ball's in the offensive hand, and they can make some plays there.
The other big thing you look for when you're trying to make a jump is, does the schedule cooperate? And I would say the answer there is a resounding yes. You've got the neutral site game against Cincinnati, although there will be far more Nebraska fans at Arrowhead than there will be Bearcat fans. Then after that, first 2 conference games are at home. They do not hit the road for a true road game until they go to Maryland in essentially mid-October. That is game number 6, I believe, for them. So it's really a great setup here for Nebraska in terms of making progress early on in this season and getting some momentum, Jake.
Yeah, I mean, the coach speak would tell you, hey, listen, we treat every opponent the same every year. You know, we don't look at the schedule, but the truth is sometimes the ball does bounce your way, and this is a very favorable schedule. But you look at like the meat there, right in the middle of the conference. There's going to be not a ton of separation between Nebraska and some of the opponents they play. So everything we just talked about is going to be the difference. Can they protect the football? That's going to allow them to win some of these close games. Can they control the line of scrimmage? That's going to allow them to win some some of these close games. So that's really what fall camp is about, and that's what Coach Rule said. This team just has to get better every single day. Then they can take advantage of that schedule.
Yeah, it should be exciting. I mean, I can understand why Husker fans would be excited about what the opportunities are for this particular team right now. But you're right, it's taking care of the little things, making sure that they can handle the controllables and make sure you take care of the football, and I think they'll be in good shape.
A lot of buzz, a lot of excitement. You can feel it here in the air in Lincoln, Rick.